Good. Okay. Well, welcome everybody to the second in our podcast series, A Happier Me, co-hosted by myself, Steve Phillip, founder of the Jordan Legacy, and my good friend, Dr. Manoj Krishna. Manoj is the founder of the app Happier Me, which helps adults and young people to lead happier and more fulfilled lives. And we're going to be talking over the series about many issues related to well-being and happiness in general. And by that very nature, that means we're going to have conversations about some challenging and difficult subjects. And I'm sure many people watching and listening to our conversation today, Manoj, will have seen the Netflix drama Adolescence with the actor Stephen Graham. For anyone who hasn't watched it, we won't give too many spoilers away yet, but it is about a 13-year-old boy accused of murdering a female classmate. And I think it highlights a combination of issues that many young people, their parents and teachers really don't know how to respond to. I think it's been really interesting. It's even prompted the UK Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, to welcome a move by Netflix to make the series available to screen for free in secondary schools. Manoj, our conversation is going to focus very much today on young people and particularly teenagers. Why, in your view, is this such an important conversation for us to be having?
Yes, even if it wasn't for the Netflix drama, Steve, there is a crisis among young people the world over. The American data suggests that 29% of teenagers have a mental health problem. 22% are thinking of suicide. 57% of girls are persistently sad. About 40% of boys. And this is impacting, families, as you know, young people. Um, so it's a huge problem. And having personal experience of it myself with someone in the family going to a secondary school, I remember there was a video one day of someone circulating, of someone shooting themselves in the head. Those are the kind of things that are happening in our schools. And of course, it's a national crisis. So we need to address this, and we need to address it by empowering young people and their families to proactively manage their own mental health.
That's really important. I think I just want to come back to, I mean, the pretty graphic example that you shared there, but we're hearing many examples in the news. We know Ian Russell, well, the father of Molly Russell, who at 14 years old had taken her own life, and it really due to content that she'd viewed and groups that she joined on social media channels. I could quote you many others that are there. Is this, in your view, is this just a social media issue, or are there other
Oh, I think
challenges that
it's
young
much
people are
wider
going
than
through?
that. There's so many factors going into it. I think society is becoming more fractured in terms of families, the old two-parent um, family exists but is in decline. So that creates all its challenges when parents are breaking up. I think the conditioning of these young people is not just from social media, but also from their peers. I mean, when you and I were growing up, we couldn't spend our money. We didn't have any money, but there was nothing to spend it on either. So we didn't really miss anything. But now, of course, there's no shortage of brands and all of that these kids want to spend. So this conditioning is coming at them from all sides. And it's social media just amplifies that.
And the impact, some of the statistics you were quoting there before about sadness in young girls and some of the other figures there where we know that, 26% of secondary school students, for example, are persistently absent, according to the Department of Education in the UK. Teachers suffering from stress, 83% of them, according to the Teacher
Yes.
Wellbeing Index, which I think are some stats you shared
Yes.
with me as well. What is the impact or ongoing impact of this? Do
So
you
many areas. So, for example, 35% of teens feel bullied. And when I talk to teens, I go to schools and I talk to them. So, why do you think kids bully each other? And they say if you're suffering inside, bullying others is a form of release. Children are beautiful because they're so honest. So this suffering that we're talking about, all this mental health crisis, is creating this wave of bullying, and it's a ripple effect of creating more suffering. A young girl told me that she's part of a group, and it's one of the conversations on the app. And she said, if I don't bully others or if I don't actually join the group, then I'm excluded from that group. And that feels even more threatening, you see?
That's really interesting. I remember 2, 3 years ago having this conversation where I heard a story of or anecdotal evidence at least of this kind of peer group pressure that takes place where almost if I didn't have a label, a mental health label of some kind, I was excluded from the group of people
Yes.
that did. In inverted commas, for being whatever normal might be considered to be, I was being excluded. So I think it's really interesting, isn't it? That
Oh, very powerful
bullying,
dynamic. Yes, yes,
yeah, very much so. I mean, you talk about bullying and the bully finding this as almost a sense of release
yes.
for them. I suppose in much the same way as we see self-harm and ultimately suicide tragically being a release from pain
17%
as
of
well.
teenagers and a third of girls, I think, if I'm not mistaken, was it one in five, are self-harming in the UK, UK
It's
alone.
huge. Yeah.
So it's a huge problem. And can you imagine the suffering for the whole family? So it's not just the family, but let's come back to schools. There's learning is impacted. I did a survey once in a secondary school. I said, how much does stress impact learning? 80% said stress impacts learning, you see, and it impacts behavior. We've just talked about that. So if a child is really distressed, then the smallest trigger creates a huge reaction. And teachers are finding it really difficult to deal with that challenging behavior, which is why more than half of them want to leave. So we need to address this problem urgently in schools. And we can no longer just say it's part of society, part of the times. I think it's completely preventable, which is what we're going to discuss.
I think that's really important. I've been delivering talks to schools very recently, to primary schools, and one of the reasons why I was brought in to speak to teachers there is that one of the head teachers said that, we have children overtly saying, I don't want to live, that I want to die. I mean, actually using this is primary school children. Now we know children have a tendency to over dramatize sometimes in terms of life events, but one of the challenges this head teacher was saying to me was that the teachers don't know how to respond. They don't know how to engage that child if that kind of disclosure comes out. So the language they might use is, "Oh, don't be silly. You'll be fine. Have a sleep tonight, and you'll be fine when you get back to school tomorrow." Which may well be the case, but the teachers just don't know how to deal with that, and they're fearful of dealing with it
Yes,
as
they
well.
feel
But they play
ill-equipped.
as
Yes. And
yeah.
or they say, oh, we should refer the patient for mental health services. Well, children's mental health services, the waiting times are months and months, if not longer. But we'll come to that. But just to maybe bring in now how the entire system is just reactive. How do you react to someone rather than being proactive and saying, what can we do way upstream to stop this problem from occurring in the first place? And we'll talk about all the different things that can be done.
Definitely.
Uh,
Well, I think that's interesting because I know at the beginning of the show, I mentioned the Netflix drama Adolescence. It's caused this huge debate online, probably more than any other drama I can recall, with the exception of maybe ITV's drama of the post office scandal. It's been said that Adolescence has helped charities and groups get an opportunity to have conversations they've not had before, but maybe they should have been having, and it may well lead to policy change. Um, to help young people. But I'm hearing you use the frame going upstream just now. So I'm thinking you're thinking this is much more than just a policy change in schools or in society generally. Tell us a little bit more about your thoughts about going upstream.
yeah, so our work at HappierMe is based on a simple truth, which is our mind is reactive and we're constantly reacting to our circumstances. But that reaction comes from all the conditioning influences we've accumulated up to that point in our lives, right? So if I've had a life where I've had a lot of trauma, my parents have split up, I've not had any love or whatever it might be, I've been bullied, etc. My mind is already really distressed. So then the smallest amount of stress creates a really high amplitude reaction. So that's one thing. The second thing is we're not aware that we're being conditioned. So when I'm looking at social media all day, which is every teenager just scrolling them, these videos, they're not aware how that is shaping their thinking. We haven't talked, by the way, of smartphone addiction. We should maybe we'll mention that. It's about, I think, 50% of teens almost have a smartphone addiction. And that's causing all their communication issues and loneliness and so on. So I think we can do a lot more by educating young people to understand what's happening in their own mind and educate parents and teachers as well. Because, for example, you might see a child behaving badly and chastise them or punish them or whatever. But if you step back and ask, why are they doing that? Then you realize it's their conditioning. They have no control over their behavior. But just helping them understand why they're doing that and what's going on proactively, I think could make all the difference. And that's what we're trying to do with Happier Me.
I think that's really important. Again, going back to my conversation with teachers very recently, question I was asking was that if a child, um, quote, misbehaves in class, is the way that we react to that in a school punitive, i.e., we isolate that child and perhaps make the situation even worse, or is our policy to have a kind of restorative approach to
Yes.
that child? And I think that's what you're saying there, is to say, let's just maybe find out why that child is behaving. But I suppose there's a challenge here, Manoj, isn't there? That there'll be teachers maybe listening to this going, okay, so where do I find the time to have this restorative conversation?
Yes. I think the first thing is to realize how important it is. Once we realize something is really important, we'll make time for it, Steve. Like we brush our teeth in the morning. We never think, well, we don't have time for that.
Mm,
Or we have breakfast, or whatever it is we do. We go to the gym, or we have classes in school which teach computing, for example. It wasn't there 30 years ago, but now every school will have them, right? Because we
mm.
know it's important. So similarly, to just pretend the problem doesn't exist, or to pretend or hope it's going to go away as a society, that's just not intelligent. So I think the first thing we could do is teach young people and adults how to calm the mind down, how to teach them practical breathing exercises, mindfulness techniques that can help them, but not just in the heat of the moment. It's a skill, right? So if you prepare and teach that on a regular basis, then when the moment of crisis comes, you can have that little bit of space in your own mind before your mind reacts. And in that space, your intelligence can come in and say, do I need to punch this kid in the face or, and so on. And it's remarkable how intelligent children are. So I had an 8-year-old girl. Let me tell you the story. Her name is Sarah. She's in a school, now she's older, in the north of England, and her video is on the app. So I says, if someone calls you a pea brain in the playground, how are you going to respond, Sarah? And she said, I know that they're suffering, and that's why they're calling me a pea brain. So instead of reacting, I'm going to go and ask them, are you okay? And try and be their friend. Because if I don't, they're going to go and take it out on somebody else. And this is an 8-year-old talking, you see? So children have this remarkable, and my conversations with them have been eye-opening. And I think I wish everyone could listen to those conversations, and they're on the app. How how much of an intelligence our children carry.
do you think there's a period in a child's life where that kind of innate intelligence that you're talking about there and empathy, if you like, starts to get washed out of a child as they get older? Because I'm listening to what you say here and going, wow, that's pretty amazing. In my head, I'm thinking, is that the norm? Is that what 8-year-old children are really thinking? Because I'm seeing a whole bunch of kids that just seem to have an attitude at times. And if a child was to come up to them and say, how could I help you? They're more likely to get a thump on the nose and or just laughed at and ridiculed. So is there a point at which something changes in a
Yes,
child's life in terms of peer pressure, for example, or
yes, I'm sure there is. But I go back to, in fact, all of us human beings have this innate intelligence, Steve, that is dormant and hidden from our own awareness and understanding. And the root word of education, educere, is to draw out. It's not to put in. Now, we adults assume education is about transferring what's in our mind into their mind because we know better.
certainly? Mm.
But my approach has always been different. I always sit down with them and say, look, I'm the same human being you are. We share the same heart, the same mind. Let's explore it together. And they respond really beautifully to that approach. So I'll tell you another story. So I'm in a class of children here locally, and I'm talking about social media. And I said, how does it make them feel? A very common question. And he said, makes me feel less than others, a pressure to conform. I feel bullied sometimes. I feel envious of others. I get angry. I hate my body. I don't like the way I look. I stop eating. Can you imagine 10-year-olds now are skipping lunch because they want to, have an idea of a body shape? Well, okay.
Yeah,
My
yeah,
next,
I can imagine. Mm.
no, see, it's the question, the question that draws out the intelligence. That's the key. So my second question is, how come a phone can make you feel all that? It's an inanimate object. How can it create all those feelings in your mind and heart? What's going on in the background? Your parents can't tell you to clean your room without an argument. How can this phone tell you to feel all this
Yeah,
stuff?
good point. Yeah.
So gradually you tease out of them that what's happening in your own mind without your own awareness is our mind is comparing all the time, right? But we're not aware we're comparing. And that process is then shaping all these feelings of being less than others and all that. So my third question is, how would your life change if you were in charge of your own mind and you only compared yourself with other children when it served you? Right? That's it. And this girl at the back of the class who had said nothing. I remember her so beautifully. She had this lovely Afro-Caribbean hair. And she said, I would be free. See the power of that.
I
So
mean, it's
all,
really profound, isn't it?
see what I mean?
Mm.
So all we are
Mm.
doing is asking questions, helping them connect with their own inner intelligence. And that should be part of education. You could equally ask another question, which is, we've all been conditioned, no question. Are you aware you've been conditioned? And how is that shaping your thoughts, your feelings, and your behavior? For example, it could be making girls stop eating, want to be like the model in the magazine, or the boys want to take protein shakes and buff up, or whatever it might be. And the third question could be, does that serve you? Once you see it clearly, we're not saying conditioning is wrong, comparison is wrong, it's part of life. But by waking up to what's happening in your own mind, you can make more intelligent choices, right?
It's really interesting. First observation I'm going to make is just having this conversation is making me feel calmer and more relaxed. But I'm thinking I'm going to put my very pragmatic head on again, as I always do, and think about the conversations that I have day in, day out about suicide prevention, self-harm prevention, what should happen in schools, and We know that, a number of people suggesting that suicide prevention should be on the school curriculum. And so I'm involved in lots of these types of conversations. Um, but I think what's really interesting is probably a question to you, how do the schools play a role in delivering or helping those students that they work with and facilitate that kind of conversation? Because you can go in and work your magic and have that conversation as you've just done, and maybe you won't be back to that school ever, maybe, or perhaps you go back in a few months' time. The teachers are there all the time. Personally, I don't believe it's just about putting mental health training or suicide prevention training into a school curriculum. I think it's about allowing children to have the type of conversation that you've just
Yes,
shared with us,
yes,
and about understanding why they are responding in the way they are to these outside pressures, and learning mechanisms and ways to better cope with
yes.
those. But how do schools do that in your view? What does something need to change?
So, Steve, that's a great question because that's what I did pre-COVID. For 5 years, I was up and down all the schools having these conversations. And I've got them all recorded. The teachers couldn't believe how clever these kids were. The parents couldn't believe how intelligent they were. The kids themselves couldn't believe, oh my God, I didn't realize I had that in me. All I would do is ask questions. But I realize it's not enough, as you said, to come in for an hour once in a while, talk to them, go away. Nothing changes. Like schools would then invite me, can you do a mindfulness class a week before the exam? I say it's going to make no difference at all. So don't bother. You're just ticking a box for your own satisfaction. So that's why we created this HappierMe app for teenagers, which is something that can be accessed 24/7 by parents, because it's got a separate section for parents, by teachers, and by kids, where these conversations can be facilitated. It's information doesn't bring transformation, but the discussion does. The understanding brings change. You see, that's the beauty
And
of
have
it.
you, I mean, I think there'd be a few people listening to this, but probably, and I've got a bit of a head start on some of the people listening to this, of course. But I think other ways you can kind of demonstrate even briefly during our conversation today on how the app works,
Yes, I'll be happy happy
particularly for
to
teenagers.
happy
Yeah,
to do that. Um, shall I just mention a couple of other things that kids could learn?
please do. Yes, yes. Yeah, it'd be great to
No, I
see.
will
But
definitely fill the
but let's get your other questions and thoughts in.
Yes. So the first thing, another common cause of distress in young people is worrying what other people think about them. Right. So I asked a young girl once from Texas, Rochelle. She's again, her conversations on the app. I said, how much of your stress comes from worrying about what other people think about you? And she said, 80%. I said, why is your mind doing that? She said, I don't know. I said, shall we find out? Shall we have a discussion? What's going on in our mind that makes us worry about what others are thinking? Not only worry about it, but we assume we know what they're thinking. We assume the worst and we feel really bad. That shapes our behavior. And then finally, I teased out of her this realization that our mind is always looking for external approval, right? As adults too. We're looking for someone else to like us so we can like ourselves. And I said to Rochelle, I said, do you think that's intelligent? You know what I mean? Now that you've seen it really clearly, because why should I wait for Steve to like Manoj before Manoj can like Manoj? Do you know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense, right?
But we do. I mean,
But we do
social comparison is, in everybody pretty
in
well, isn't it?
everybody. See, what I'm saying,
Mm.
it's not right or wrong. It's just the way our mind is wired, but we're not aware.
Mm.
Once you become aware of it, you realize that doesn't make sense. Right? It's not serving me. That's the main thing. It's not serving me. Not saying it's wrong. Of course, Steve says nice things about Manoj. I'd welcome it. So thank you, Steve. But I'm not going to rely on that for my sense of self-worth or self-esteem or all that. Once I see that clearly, I realize I need to be my own best friend first.
I mean, I think there's a huge freedom in there. I'm just trying to imagine because I'm somebody, I'm as human as everybody else, and there are days where if let's say on social media and the content I share, if it's not been a particularly good day for me on social media and not enough people have responded and liked
Yes.
my posts, there's a little part of me feeling a little hurt here, and
Yes.
and you think, well, that's not an intelligent response, Steve. There could be a million and one reasons why that's not happened.
Yes.
But there'd be a huge freedom in not really
What I'm saying is our mind becomes
caring.
dependent on that,
Yeah.
and especially with social media, on the likes and all of that.
mm
So
mm
then you fake your own life online so that you get more likes, and and then it becomes a crisis because then there's two people in your life, you and your fake image and all of that.
Yes. Yeah. Good. Good.
So
Good.
we've
Good
just given
point.
three examples: conditioning, comparison, and our need for external approval that shape the distress we feel. And just by understanding what's happening in our own mind can bring freedom from suffering, right? And there's so much more we could discuss, but these are three very practical things.
I think
So
so.
let me,
And
sorry,
I
go
know
ahead.
you're going to come to the app now, but just pick on something you said as well is as we look at the app is that there are three parties involved in this equation, aren't there? Really, there are the children themselves, the teenagers themselves in this case. There are the teachers, which we've talked about in the schools and the education centres, and of course the parents as
Yes,
well can all play a role
of
in
course they
supporting
can.
young people.
Yes, yes, yes. And this understand, and people often ask me, well, how can you motivate a 14-year-old, for example, who's more interested in TikTok and computer games to
By the way, that's the question that everybody listening wants the answer to right now.
Yes.
So,
So my answer is this, that a child doesn't come to school saying, I want to learn history or I love maths. I really, really want to be in that maths class or whatever subject it might be, right? But we, as adults, make those choices for them because we know it's important. So when we agree something is really important, and I think self-understanding is the most important thing that's never taught, and it could transform the children's lives, society as a whole, and the future of humanity. We've talked about that. I think we would all regard that as really important thing to do. And we would do it,
I
right?
agree.
We just
I
have
agree.
to wake up and realize how important all this is, Steve. But okay,
Very much so. Or you tell one or two Ofsted inspectors that as well, maybe within the schools. So,
yes, yes. And you see, it could be the answer to the crisis we have now. All the problems we mentioned earlier can be
yeah,
prevented. A head teacher told me at the age of 11, they know which kids are going to go to jail.
that's scary.
Scary.
That
So we
is.
need to
It is.
start really upstream, way upstream. And I must tell you that these children, their inner intelligence is beautiful. It's so beautiful, it brings tears to my eyes. And that's what made me leave my career as a surgeon and do this work full time with HappierMe. Because I believe that we're letting them down by not equipping them with these tools. And by the way, this understanding is not based on a book, religion, philosophy, psychology. It's just holding up mirror and saying, I'm going to learn about myself. Self-awareness is only noticing what you're thinking, feeling, and doing, and understanding why. And that's all. It's so simple, right? If you look at it that way, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it sounds very simple, but it's profound. I mean, it
It's
is
profound. See what I mean?
potentially
Yes.
the key that needs unlocking
Yes.
to change a lot of things
To change a
and
lot of things. Exactly right.
create a healthier younger generation growing up as well.
Yes. Shall I show you around the app
Yes,
quickly?
let's have a look. I'm sure there's a few people waiting to say, well, how might this work?
Yes.
And for me,
Okay. I'm just going to show you around the teen app. So this is the adult app. It's HappierMe.app, or you can download it from the common stores. If you go to the menu on the top right, the first item is HappierMe for teenagers. And that's the teen app here. So there's a section at the top called Feel Better Now. So depending on what you're going through, say you're going through anxiety, which is like 40% of kids, there are exercises here to feel calm straight away. So breathing exercises, a small meditation, a short video, and a podcast. And then we say, let's go deeper to understand why we're feeling anxious and study the subject in more detail. And this could be explored in schools with the children. And you have small group discussions and get them to come up with the answers. So that's just the feel better now section, and that has number of items. For example, relationship problems, loneliness, which is about 40% of young people, boredom, depression is about 10% of kids, and so on. Then there's a daily practice, and kids really love this. It's like a called a daily check-in. Say you're feeling self-critical, and the app asks you, so we've got an online journal where we are asking all the time, asking questions. And it's the question, as you know, that opens the door to a deeper understanding in yourself. So why are you self-critical? Or what can you appreciate about yourself? Say, okay, I am um, a good pianist, for example. I play the piano well, and that's saved to your journal. But then the app offers you content linked to how you're feeling. So, for example, there's a video on 4 ways to cope with criticism, or a story, or a article to read, or a podcast to listen to. Or you can explore the module in more detail on criticism or then listen to a conversation with a teenager on dealing with criticism. And this is Golda, who's a teenager in the United States. So there are lots of different ways in which young people can access.
And I think this is important, Manoj, because this goes beyond what we see with a lot of apps. And there are many, people are saying that, probably thinking there are many apps out there that seem to automatically offer a solution without going deeper into understanding why I
Yes.
need that solution. And I think for me, already I can see that this just takes the individual much deeper to allow them the understanding so they can make better use of the solution, I would think.
Yes, I think once you understand why you feel and think and behave in the way that you do, that understanding itself opens the door to a deeper intelligence. And by the way, this intelligence is not academic intelligence, right? Anyone who can swim can have, it's not related to intellect. Anyone who's curious can avail of or connect with this inner intelligence. And there's a breathing exercise, a question of the day, a quotation, and so on. Lots of short videos, which young people love. For example, how to be happier, tips to manage difficult emotions. We have a number of coaches, by the way, on the app. And this one, for example, that 70% of people feel worse about themselves after scrolling through social media. So Maria used to be a supermodel. She lived in New York, Paris, but all of those big cities in the world. And now she's a coach. And here she's talking about the idea of beauty and how young girls, particularly, are so influenced by images they see online. And she makes the point that beauty is something that begins on the inside. So we have these wonderful coaches who are there to provide inspiration. There's a section here called Teen Talk, and I'd love all your listeners to listen to just one of them because they're so inspiring. And for example, this one here, Sia's in Dubai, and she's part of the Dubai cricket team, and she talks openly about going through depression and having suicidal thoughts and how she got over it. And I think other teenagers listening to that will get inspired to realize how having these conversations or listening to them can inspire them as well to overcome their problems.
And I think something, just the two examples you've given, there, one, previous supermodel, one a successful sports person, often the people that we look up to or teenagers look up to, and think they've got everything sorted. So to have somebody from that kind of background sharing their experiences and is I think really important. As we continue just looking at the app there, manager, question I've got is, there've been a lot of parents being very vocal, just coming back to adolescence and fearful of what they saw. And understandably, there's been maybe somewhat of a knee-jerk reaction to this. But in terms of, I'm trying to imagine a parent here working or sitting alongside their child. Other ways that parents and teenagers or young people can kind of work together on this
Yes, yes. So quite
app.
often, I used to have a teenager in the house, and I would project the app on the TV, and we would just go through a module at a time. So let me just show you the modules we have. So, for example, um, so we have 8 broad topics. So, say managing your emotions is one of them. And we have a number of modules on different things like anger, loneliness, envy. So, take anger, for example. So, I would just project this onto the TV and then we would, or you could just do it on their phone. And then we just go through the whole thing one at a time and saying, what do you think of this? And then we'd have a conversation or listen to a mini podcast on exploring anger, or um, you know, uh, now, for example, here's an online question, a journal question. Think of 2 occasions when you got angry, and I could share my story, and my teenage son would share his story, and so on. So I
So,
think there's
so,
a way
so
of
this is
doing
a
that.
parent and child learning together, isn't it?
Yes,
It's
exactly right.
because let's just say we've got a teenager that's got anger issues. Typically the parent's going to say, "You need to be less angry.
Yes,
Stop being so angry." Pretty well end of the conversation. But
yes,
if we were to have a conversation that said, "Are you open to exploring why this might be happening? I might learn something too.
yes,
Are you open to us learning together?" That's a very different approach, and making time for this
yes.
as well. I can see how this could really work if parents were, facilitated and made that time.
Yes, I think those kind of open conversations where you're learning together. So I would tell my teenage son, I'd say, yeah, I get stressed too. And he would say, oh, yeah, I get stressed too. So the teachers and the students in the school are both anxious, for example, but about different things. The
Mhm.
teachers are anxious about Ofsted, and the kids are anxious what other people think of them, and so on. Do you see what I mean? But the anxiety is the same and can be explored together. So the app offers lots of different subjects. There's also a whole section on succeed in life, which includes modules on communication and success and relationships and making better decisions. So it's not just about dealing with their mental health issues, but also equipping them with the tools to succeed in life, have happier relationships, and so on. So
Yeah, I
on
mean
the
that's been
yeah, um, we also have on the Explore page, you'll find lots of life stories, podcasts. We've got more than 100 podcasts on different subjects, including a whole section on mini podcasts, because, kids like their 2 minute and 3 minute podcasts, which they can learn themselves. There's some awareness exercises. You can contact a coach. And in our pathway program, we have all the different modules, for example, on relationships, stress, communication, how to be happy, how to deal with criticism. And these are skills not only to help them be happy today, but which will equip them with the skills they need to, succeed in the world. For example, how to respond to bullying, which affects a third of kids. So I'm going to pause there, Steve, because I think we could go on and on, but I hope
well,
that's
we could,
good.
but I think this is fascinating, Manoj, because I seriously can see a situation where there are parents listening to this now thinking, I could do that, I could do that, I could have that kind of conversation facilitated by the app. It would help me as a parent to have that conversation, and open up some of the concerns and issues for their teenage son or daughter that they've just not been able to find a way to have that conversation. So I think there are added benefits, not just the content that the app provides, but added benefits in terms of the relationship there.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Now, I know time is against us as always, but there's probably not a quick answer to this. You touched on it a little earlier about mobile phones. We know it's one of the big concerns and issues talked about in the media and at government levels. Should phones be banned in schools and all these kind of conversations. Um, what kind of role do you think, and there's not a quick answer to this, I appreciate that, can schools and parents play in supporting young people with their use of mobile phones? I don't know a better way to put that
Yeah.
really, because I
I
think you
think,
probably know where I'm going with this.
yeah, I understand. I think it's unrealistic, personally, to ban social media. I think you could try, but then, you'd have to roll back the clock 25 years, right?
Yeah,
Um,
kind of that dog's been let out of the kennel in a way, isn't
yeah.
it? Yeah, yeah,
So I don't
yeah.
think it's that. And also, we've got to equip them with the skills and tools to deal with all this stuff better. So it's, I think, much better to educate them about what's going on in their own mind that makes them want to spend 8 hours a day. And then you realize, oh, my mind is restless and is always looking for stimulation and for activity. Why is my mind restless? What can I do to calm it down? Oh, I could do some breath work, for example. Or how is social media conditioning me? Do I need to believe everything I read? Can I stop comparing? And so on. So those are the kind of conversations, and that learning then allows us to approach social media use with much more intelligence. I think that's a better way.
Yeah, no, it's about education, isn't it? It's not about restricting or banning, because in many ways we're too far down the road to have the desired effect we need to have there. And I think with restriction comes other issues and challenges
I mean, it may
anyway.
be that
But
they have a certain age group. So maybe as parents, you could say, I'm not going to give the phone to a 13-year-old or 14-year-old, though they'll be crying out for it. But whenever you give it to them, these issues are going to come up because they're going to be
yeah,
there in colleges, universities, as young adults. So much better to educate them about how their mind is interacting with social media, what's going on in your own mind, and how can you create a better relationship with it. Do you understand?
as always, Manoj, fascinating conversation. I hope everyone listening has found this useful as well. If you have found today useful, and you're watching our conversation on YouTube, please leave a comment on the YouTube comments there. If you're picking this up via the various social media channels that we'll be sharing this by, please leave comments on the social media posts as well. If you've got questions, tag us in those as well. But engage with the conversation. I think that's really important. Have you found this useful? Have you found it beneficial? What other questions have you got? And of course, if you would like details about how to access Happier Me, the app, we're going to include the information on our social media platforms. You're probably seeing it there right now, and via the Jordan Legacy website as well, or contact directly happierme.app, where you'll get straight into the app. Well, Manoj, thank you. Again, another really important conversation. And we'll look forward to the next one, which will be in a few weeks' time. And we may well be looking at relationship
Yes, yes,
breakdowns for that particular subject, unless anything else appears in the news before then that we think
yes.
takes
And
a
Steve, let
priority.
me take a moment to pause and just thank you for the work you're doing with the Jordan Legacy and bringing to the forefront of everyone's minds these burning issues in society, which are causing just so much suffering, which, as we know, can be prevented and more easily overcome if you lived with a greater sense of self-awareness and self-understanding, which is what we're trying to do together.
Well, thank you, and appreciate that. And I almost got to mention, of course, the work at the Jordan Legacy we do. If you want to find out more about that, please go to thejordanlegacy.com and our website there. But thank you, Manoj. Really appreciate that as always. Good to talk. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And until next time, from Manoj and myself, thank you for joining us.
Goodbye.